Welcome back, everybody. Continuing on here with Chapter 8, we have the idea of aggregation. And what I'll tell you is this sounds scarier than it is in practice. The idea here is that it's possible to have an instance of a class that is a field in another class. So what does that mean? It essentially means that you are using as if it was a variable in your class, or a variable rather from a different class. So the example they kind of muddle through here is, think about making a house, for example. You've got, one house is the object that you can point to, but really it's comprised of wood, it's comprised of metal, it's comprised of glass, it's comprised of plastic, it's comprised of, bodies in the wall or under the, that's probably not true. But there's lots of different pieces that make the object of your house up. And that's kind of the idea that we have going here. So if we just look at this really crappy piece of art, you can call it art, I guess. It's word art. It's not really art. If we look at this garbage, graph that I put together for you here, just as a kind of an exemplar of what's going on. If we are going to create a student class. So each time a new student is enrolled, we would have a new student object that derives from the student class. Like we've seen before, every student would need a student ID. They would have a social security number. Probably they would have a first name. Probably they would have a last name. And now we have this idea of program ID. The program ID is something that really can derive from a field here in another class. So this program ID that we think belongs to student as a class actually belongs over here to a program. So the CIS program is our affiliated class. Here in this class we have a program name, we have a number of credits, and we have a program ID. So this here, student class, is really an aggregate. It is comprised of members of the student class, student ID, social security number, first name, last name, but it's also comprised of fields from another class, the CIS program class. So that's really what we're talking about here is, we are referring rather to one object that is really representative of more than one class because it can have fields, so just variables from someplace else. So the example we see here in the text is another school-based example. If we look at a course, for example, right? So a Java course, it's entirely possible that multiple courses are going to be offered, right? So we could potentially have like a daytime course and a nighttime course. And each one of those would have an instructor. Each one of those would have, a course number, things of that nature. But we would also have a textbook, right? And we try not to do this in CIS, and I'm not pointing at any place here at Rock Valley particularly. But I can tell you in my academic career, I have taken the exact same course just at a different time from some of my constituents, and we will have different textbooks. So the same course, different course IDs, different instructors, and different textbooks. And all of this is something that we can represent in Java as we're trying to create a program that is a collection of classes. So if we kind of scroll down here, here we have code listing 8-12, the instructor.java. So every instructor has a last name, a first name, and an office number. None of this is particularly new. Here we can see with this instructor class on 8.12, we can see that this actually implements one of those copy constructor classes. So right here, it's lines 33 through 38. If we pass instructor another object, so if we pass the call to instructor another instructor object, what we'll do is we'll effectively make a copy of it. So we pass instructor 2, and then we assign last name, first name, and office number, those last name, first name, and office number fields from object 2, and voila, we have created essentially a new copy of that instructor. So that is a continuation from the previous, I think it was 8.6, the copy. So the most immediately previous video to this. Here we have a UML diagram for a textbook. Again, this is associated with figure 8-12. And this time we have textbook. So it's got a title, an author, a publisher, blah, 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 right? So textbook, here's textbook Java. As we go through here, they are implementing that idea of a copy constructor where we initialize the object based on the fields from another object. And as we go down, this is really where the idea of aggregation comes together. For the courses that we put together, a course is going to have a course name, it's going to have a course number, it's going to have an instructor, and a textbook. So here, instructor comes from a class that we've already identified elsewhere. Here, textbook comes from a class that we've already identified elsewhere. And course is essentially going to be an aggregate, a mixture of 3 classes that we've defined: the course class, the instructor class, and the textbook class. In this way, we refer to this as a has-a relationship, or it's also called whole-part relationship. The idea is that course has a relationship with instructor and textbook. The idea of whole-part is the whole of course is constructed from part of instructor and part of textbook. For the most part, when you are using the lingo, you will call this a has-a relationship rather than whole part. And this is someplace after page 515, but it's definitely with figure 8.13. So here, the course.java is again just saying, hey, here we are. We have an instructor, and this comes from the instructor class. We have a textbook, and this comes from the textbook class. And the way we can see that is here, when we are creating a course, that comes from an instructor object and a textbook object, as well as a string being passed to the constructor. So we're going to see how this works in one of the code sample videos where we put together an aggregate class that exists elsewhere. So aggregation really sounds like it'd be a scary thing, but this really is something that we have seen before, right? When you make dinner, you make it with multiple different ingredients. When we build a house, when we build a car, we make it from multiple different ingredients. Those ingredients can exist as an entity outside. So when we aggregate something, what we're saying is we have an instance of a class field is someplace else in another class. So, instructor might come from a different class. Textbook might come from a different class, but we can put those together so that we can create a rational object called a course.